Hi, Bobby.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good. Here, I'm turning off the music.
Okay, cool.
Hold on, you're the first one here, so hopefully we'll get some people soon. Well, there's Sir. All right, here I am.
Is my background too like psychedelic or something? All those dots, I'm looking at it now. I had a wall of cocks behind me and I didn't think it was appropriate to have this shelf with these little sculptures of phalluses on it and some phallic artwork and stuff and sculptures that are on behind this wall.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're fine. I mean, as you can see, I'm coming to you from the early 80s. But yeah, I think we're all, there's Gail. Okay, good. Now we're getting more folks coming in.
Yay.
Oh. Huh. Hi.
Yeah, I think you look great.
Hi, Nicholas.
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, fantastic.
This is going to be a great night.
It is. Everyone looks wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Look at that.
What I need to do though, I need to something different with.
I thought that I could have put a photo in the background, can't I?
Yeah, I was thinking of a plant or something here, but then I didn't want to be too obvious.
All right, we need Pauline Park and KRISTEN and Phil, I believe, right? I think we're still missing some people.
For some reason, something's wrong with my.
Thank you for everyone putting this together. This is
No, this is like an annual thing. We did this last year, and it was pretty. It was. I mean, people loved it.
Yeah.
And the whole audience that weren't aware, a younger audience that didn't really know about Quentin Crisp, and sort of like the kind of thinking, and there's a lot of Quentin on YouTube.
I was there, but that's right. But in the real, it was, right? It wasn't on Zoom, right?
No. It was
FRAN.
live.
Yeah, it was very awkward also setting this up because I'm used to being out and about where I'm like meeting people and talking to people and then people are physically there, and doing this whole thing on email and then meeting people weird. But that's this whole COVID thing is getting us more into this, and I think they're really creative ways.
There is. Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, KRISTEN.
Hello.
Hi, Bobby. Chris, wow, good.
Lovely.
How is everyone tonight?
Pretty good. How are you?
Excited.
Good. Yeah, I just got off of a match. I play video games, and I ended up playing a session. I played Friday the 13th because I love horror movies. And I got to play with the voice of one of my favorite characters. She did a thing, so it was cool.
Oh,
and
cool.
We were protecting her, and we let her kill Jason. She has to be the final girl. But yeah.
Sweet.
So how do you people feel about your stories? It was kind of like Phillip, who I'm surprised isn't here yet.
Let me call him.
He's the literary.
I see. Yeah, Philip's right there. Oh, maybe Philip. Well, you're muted, Philip, but
yeah.
I can see you though.
I was just talking about you.
I was listening very carefully here.
Had done some research on the on all of yous, and that's how the stories got picked, right? Like who was reading what.
Story. I love the one I have.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you come about that, though?
You haven't heard the other parts because I only sent you your own parts, so you'll be hearing the other stories read by other, so you'll get a full picture, and we'll send you a book along with your honorarium in cash.
Amazing. Thank you.
Will you send a recording of tonight? Will you send that out, a recording of that?
Thomas is working on that, or Gail, Thomas and Gail will be recorded. Yeah, so we will have.
Yes.
I would say that will take a couple days, right, Thomas?
Yeah, it'll take a little bit of time to turn over, but like,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
great. We'll have it though, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Philip,
Praise
I'm
God.
so awkward with my background, isn't it? Is it a little bit too much? Should I stick a photo up there or something?
I think it looks fine.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah, I kind of like a pattern.
Oh, I like it a lot.
I don't know if you can see it, but it makes me feel like I'm in Morocco or something. Kyle.
What's wrong in Morocco?
So, nothing, not these days.
Well, are you going to be doing just a one view or a group, or how is that?
that, you know, that was my biggest question. I think we're still waiting on Pauline Park, but we can get started. Because I've got a list of readers right here. It starts with BOBBIE, HONDO, and then KRISTEN, then Pauline Park, and then it says surprise reader. And 4 on being 90. Are we skipping that one, or is someone else?
No, we're not doing that. We're going to do something because it's on Quentin's birthday on December 25th. So I want to do something and launch that piece on December 25th.
Okay. So in regard to the list I have, it goes Pauline Park, which is sex, sexuality, and identity. And then we just skip number 4 and
Right.
into Nicholas GORHAM.
Right.
You believe in God. And so that would be the sequence, yes?
Right. Correct.
Okay. What I basically can do is like, you know, Philip, I'm gonna use you as my example because like I can pin somebody and then I can also spotlight. So everybody should be seeing now, right?
Philip, our distinguished executive editor.
Oh, don't embarrass me.
Philip, can you see yourself large?
I see myself very large. Yeah.
Oh, well, that is very good. That is
So,
It's important.
so when we have our
That's even
person
better.
reading,
That's better.
this will be the view, and then they can go in and look at the gallery and everything, but they would only be able to really see the panelists because they would be attendees, so they wouldn't be able to see like all the other guests, if that makes sense. But they'll have, this is their highlight. And then the only other thing I would ask is that everybody make sure that they mute themselves during, if they are not speaking. And so that way we'll be, I mean, I can control that as well, but it's also good for you to make sure that you've muted yourself, just so that you don't pop up or we don't have anything sort of weird come in. You know, I'm going to take away my video and my audio once the show begins.
Should we stop our video?
Huh?
When I'm not on camera, when it's not my turn, should I push stop video so nobody could see me?
And just your name.
I would honestly say that's up to you. You certainly can, especially if you need to like brush your hair or something. But
Otherwise, it could be, we leave it up.
yeah, I think you can leave it up and you'll be okay.
That's
I
what it looks
suggest
like
that
from-
because everybody looks so nice and it's
Yeah,
kind
I
of
think
nice to
that
see all the
it's sort of a
panelists.
little bit of a
Except
participant.
me. You can put me, you know.
Oh, come on.
Oh, you're beautiful. Stop.
To see
Oh, come on.
the other readers involved.
The hair is, I
You know,
love it.
I don't think people need to see me, but I do think we should feature our performers or our readers as a part of this.
Good.
And then obviously, you know, like I said, if you need to like do your hair or something like that, then you can turn it off and turn it on. But just with the microphone, especially make sure that you have yourself muted. And then when you are up for reading, make sure that you have unmuted yourself because you have that control too. So make sure that when you start speaking, that you're definitely unmuted. So I know we're all familiar with this stuff, but you know, I just want to make sure we are reviewing everything.
Question, will everyone be muted? The audience?
Yes, the audience will all be muted. The audience will just be audience and shouldn't be able to talk.
Is it
At the end, you can unmute them so they can applaud. We can unmute them at the end so they can applaud.
Is it okay if I assume that they are reacting during my reading?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay, like as if somebody was laughing and react to that?
Oh, yeah, yes,
Okay.
of course. And I do think that they'll be able to do like emojis and you know how they can have like clapping hands and certain.
Well, don't they usually put stuff in the chat?
Yes.
Yeah, they'll have a chat.
There'll be a chat, so you can read the chat. If they have something to say about your thing, they usually put it in the chat, then you can read that sort of like later.
But they won't be able to like talk over you.
Okay.
Right.
So yes. My other question, and then I think we can actually sort of, you know, get settled until about 7:30 is, are we having, so I think we're having someone who's doing an introduction, yes?
Sir is doing introduction.
I'm introduction. I have it written. It's less than 200 words, so it's very brief. It's not a lot of blah, blah, blah.
It's only about a minute.
Okay.
And at the end, I will, you know, thank everyone. And, you know, at that point, if you want to unmute the audience to applause, if you want to do that, I can say, we will unmute you now if you'd like to applaud. No, do you want to do something like that? No, we should just say thank you and good night.
Yeah, I think we should just say thank you and have a little bit more.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
keep it nice and neat and have people sort of like, wow, just get the show, bam, and then it's, we've done our job.
Another question, and sir, this might be for you. So are you going to be the MC? Meaning after our first reader, do I go back to you and then do you say,
No,
thank you, here is our second reader?
no, it goes from one reader, there's a list, you
Yeah,
know,
I have the list is Bobbie, Hondo, number 1,
right, so when Bobbie goes
and
off,
LOVELL, number 2.
then the number 2 comes on. So there's no, I
So
don't have
you want to go directly from Bobbie to KRISTEN and so forth. like
Yes,
it is
and
in
they
the
should
list.
read the title, make sure you read the title of the work before you read the work, of course. And you can do your own thing with the work because you're all so fabulous.
Uh-huh.
So can I ask this? So when one person ends, they will stop video or?
They will stop video and then the next person will come on. There may be a couple of seconds delay or something. But
So like, yeah, right now I'm gonna go from Sur to Bobbie. Hold on. Now I've got Bobbie as the highlight.
No, okay.
Oh, you have, okay.
Are we going to do a moment of silence for Quentin?
Never thought of that.
Because that's how I was going to start my reading, actually.
Okay.
Now, what's the title you're reading?
well, actually, if you're going to start your reading that way, then I think that's good to do it. But
Okay.
because you were going to start it that way, and since I'm just making an introduction, you'll come on, you'll do your silence, and then you'll do your thing.
Perfect, perfect.
Perfect. Love that.
All right, so I'm gonna
Can
go
I
back.
ask a question for a second? When everything ends, sir, could you thank everyone? Something
Oh,
like that?
absolutely.
Okay, so you're gonna pull in at the end. Okay.
Yeah, just
So-
well, thank you readers, and thank you audience and everyone for coming. We're so grateful that we've been able to
You're hired.
pull it off, bam, and
Thank
then it's over.
Okay, so what I have here, I'm just gonna review this and I think we can all break and hang out until 7:30. We're gonna start with an introduction by Sur, then we go to Bobbie Hondo, then KRISTEN LOVELL, then Pauline Park, followed by Nicholas Gorham, then Bobbie Hondo, then Nicholas Gorham, then FRAN SISCO, a final piece by Pauline Park, and then a closing statement by Sur, and then show's over, yes?
Exactement.
That's it.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, any questions?
No. No.
No, I think we're
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
Let's get everybody muted. I'm gonna stop my video. And I have,
Okay, I'm gonna stop mine.
and then at about 7:30, maybe we can get started, yeah? How do you
Oh,
wanna
yeah.
handle the starting of the show, sir? Do you wanna text, or how do we wanna sort of make sure everybody knows the show is starting? All the performers. Oh, you've muted yourself.
No, everybody's muted, Thomas.
Dang.
Here, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
That's a good idea. How am I going to know? Well, I will put my name up, and when I don't know.
Just start at 7:30.
I'll start at 7:30.
Yeah, that's when the show starts.
All right, 7:30 it is.
I'll appear, and then people will say, "Oh, something's happening," and then I'll start to speak.
Yeah, so we're all on the
7:30
same page.
Ring a bell, sir.
Oh, I can do that. Perfect. I don't have a bell here. I'll find one.
I have a bell.
Oh, good. So you can ring the bell.
The clapping can do it, right?
Okay.
But I will just be the sound, not the picture, hopefully.
Right. You'll
All
just.
right, so
You want to take it?
I hear the sound. After a few seconds after hearing the sound, I will speak.
And just so you know, I'm gonna let you guys mute and unmute yourselves. If someone is coming in during someone else's piece, I might mute you just so you don't interrupt someone else. But like, I'm gonna let you mute and unmute yourself before you're reading and stuff like that. So please,
Okay.
want to screw up that or do, I think it's good for you to have that control. Any questions about that? We good?
Yeah, we're good. We only have 10 minutes to use the restroom and all that stuff,
All
so
right,
let's do it.
Let's take that 10 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. Break a leg.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. That's awesome.
Well, appreciate you.
Sir, do you think I'm bright enough?
You're very bright.
Yeah. Okay, you don't think I need more light?
Looking good. I love the tam.
folks, I'm going to start the event so we can have people start arriving.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Sur Rodney, one of your hosts for tonight's event, along with Phillip Ward, Quentin's estate executor, Crisperanto, the Quentin Crisp Archives, Gail Thacker, and Thomas Gordon of the Gene Frankel Theatre. We thank you for joining us this evening, a night celebrating the life of Quentin Crisp and for celebrating the lives of our transgender family. This past week, people and organizations around the country participated in Transgender Awareness Week to help raise visibility about transgender people and address issues members of the community face. Tonight, we continue that celebration with the reading of Quentin Crisp's words by some of the community's stellar performers. The selections are from Quentin's posthumous books, The Last Word, an autobiography, and its companion book, One More Thing. Also, an extract from Quentin's autobiography, The Naked Civil Servant, and his one-person show, An Evening with Quentin Crisp. Again, thank you for joining us for this Gene Frankel Theatre benefit performance. Enjoy the show. And our first reader of the night is the exciting BOBBIE HONDO. Let us begin the celebration.
Thank you, Sur Rodney, for that introduction. I enjoyed being here with you all tonight and celebrating Quentin Crisp. I want to have just a little bit of a moment of silence for him and all the other people that we've lost throughout this year and time before. So if you join me for a split second to just give a little moment of silence for everyone, I really appreciate it. Okay, thank you. So this is an excerpt from The Naked Civil Servant, and it goes, "From the dawn of my history, I was so disfigured by the characteristics of a certain kind of homosexual person that when I grew up, I realized I could not ignore my predicament. The way in which I chose to deal with it would now be called existentialist. Perhaps Jean-Paul Sartre would be kind enough to say that I exercised the last vestiges of my free will by swimming with the tide, but faster. I mean, in the meantime of which I am writing, I was merely thought of as brazening it out. I became not merely a self-confessed homosexual, but a self-evident one. That is to say, I put my case not only before the people who knew me, but also before strangers. This was not difficult to do. I wore makeup at the time, even when women eyeshadow was sinful. Many a young girl in those days had to leave home and go to the streets simply in order to put nail varnish. As soon as I put my uniform on, the rest of my life solidified around me like plaster caster. From that moment on, my friends were anyone who could put up with the disgrace, my occupation, any job from which I was not given the sack, my playground, any cafe or restaurant from which I was not barred, or any street corner from which the police did not move me on. An additional restricting circumstance was the year in which I first pointed my toes towards the outer world was 1932. The tidal wave started by the fall of Wall Street. Had by this time reached London, the sky was dark with millionaires throwing themselves out of the windows. So black was the way that my progress consisted of long periods of inert despondency, punctuated by spasmodic lurches forward towards any small chink of light that I thought I saw. In a major issue, I had never had any choice, and therefore the world regret had in my life, not application. As the years went by, I did not get any lighter, but it became accustomed to the dark. As the years went by, it did not get lighter, but I became accustomed to the dark. Consequently, I was able to move with a little more of that freedom, which T.S. Eliot says is a different kind of pain from prison. These crippling disadvantages gave my life an interest that it would otherwise never have had. To survive at all was the adventure. To reach the old age was a miracle. In one respect, it was a blessing. In an expanding universe, time is on the side of the outcast. Those who once inhibited the suburbs of the human content find, without changing their address, they eventually live in the metropolis. In my case, this took a very long time. Thank you.
Exhibitionist. For the first 14 years of my life, I cried and was sick, and after that, I had to think some other way of drawing attention to myself. The real trouble was that as soon as I realized that my mother's love was to be divided fairly between the four of us, I flew into an ungovernable rage from which I have never fully recovered. But I did decide that the way to draw attention to myself was to live the life of a self-made beauty. Of course, this was very annoying to everyone, even when you do it and you're a woman. It's annoying enough, but when you're a man and you decide to exploit your looks, it's of course even more annoying. I knew I would have to pay a terrible price for this, but I didn't know exactly what price it would be. However, as the years gone by, I've now been able to make an overdose of exhibitionism that would absolutely kill anyone who was starting out on their career. The only trouble is that you practice carefully almost every day of your life how to conceal your feelings about your public perception. You, in the end, become indifferent to what goes on, and this means that your life becomes boring. This is, to my mind, absolutely unavoidable. If you fortify yourself against what might happen to you, though, through any one course of action, you in the end become so fully fortified that you are incapable of receiving any impression from outside whatsoever. And now people say to me, what do you think of the dress I'm wearing? What do you think of the book I've written? I don't know, and this makes them cross because they think that this is another of my affections. Once you're known to be affected, anything can be ascribed to your affections. Having once adopted a flippant attitude towards almost everything, you find yourself then protesting your sincerity on occasion. And of course, it no longer works. Everything you do and say can be laughed off, and you find you've lost your connection with the outer world altogether. You can only be turned on and off like a form of entertainment. It pays off in the sense that then become valuable as entertainment. You find that you can best exploit this by living the cafe life. So that though I've done various jobs, I didn't really come into my own and find the job, as Gibbon would say, that I was born to do until I became a model. This combined the two things I would most have liked to be, a martyr and an actor. It's not that I'm actually masochistic. It's only that I find that it's very difficult to value anything that hasn't come to you through a certain amount of suffering. People are always saying to me, even in the art schools, when putting me in a terrible, difficult position for 8 hours, but then you love to suffer, don't you? My reply is not that I love to suffer, but if we don't suffer, how shall we know that we live? This seems to me not to be masochism, but something which exists in almost all Puritan temperament. That if a thing causes you some effort, then it becomes more worthwhile. Together with every pleasure, there's a desire to do without. In order to be an artist model, you don't really require the things that public image must have of you. You don't require to be a great beauty. What you do require is, first of all, the same things that you need in order to do any job on earth, such as to scrub the doorstep. You have to be punctual. You have to do it with a will, and you haven't to complain. In the school, which is where all modeling is done now, because private artists are really all abstract artists. They're all abstract artists and don't require models. In fact, would regard the model as a distraction. What you're required to do is turn up, be on time, not complain, and not talk to the students. This isn't easy because the job as the years go by become boring. I can say of modeling that it's the only job I've ever had where I understood what was doing. But after a bit, it becomes less interesting. And then you have only your aches and pains to think about, your falling arches, your varicose veins. Other models have asked me what I think about when I'm posing. Evidently, that means that they think about something else. I can only think about what I'm doing. If I think about anything else, then those poses crumble, falls apart, relaxes. You always got to pose much more than you imagine because students draw less than they see. Therefore, you never merely standing, sitting, or lying. You are standing, sitting, or lying. You are standing, sitting, or lying like mad. You have to preserve attention all over your body. And even that, you can't keep the attention of the students. They not only talk, sing, play their guitars, make love, they even fight and roll about the floor. So you have to say, shall I get down? Have you finished now? This is due partly to the fact that they are students. They are young. That they have their own life to live, and partly the fact that all art is now more abstract. And this means that the keenness to learn to draw a more complicated machine the way that it has passed forever. They are brought into the life room and kept there by the domination of art masters, not by the eagerness of their part. One of the interests of being an eccentric is that you can see borne out everywhere around you what you have actually lived for. You can see freedom and clothes come to the whole of London. I come from a time when people who wore suede shoes or green shirts were under suspicion. Now that time has gone forever, and this puts me in the mainstream where I stand on the very edge. I would say that this freedom of dress is part of a bigger freedom, a freedom to do as you please, as long as it doesn't really make any difference to other people. I would say the purpose of life now for me is to get into my grave without getting into debt. As far as I'm concerned, the purpose of life is to make a mad dash across open country and under fire between cradle and the grave.
Sex, sexuality, and identity. This will be the last book that I write. What little I can say and do is almost done, because at the end of the day, I am nobody and I am nothing. Most of my life is contained within the pages of The Naked Civil Servant and How to Become a Virgin. The former deals with my so-called life in England, and the latter with my rebirth here in America. I only have a few more stories left to share before my well runs dry. I know and hope that the end is near. This book will be my swan song, a chance for me to have the last word. Where then should I begin? I'll begin with my truth at the very beginning. I don't think there was a single event or thought in my life which shaped who I am today. But there was one long daydream that I lived in up until at least the age of 11 or 12. So let us begin this book with that daydream. When I was very young, my mother read romantic poems to me. She recited Idylls of the King by Mr. Tennyson and the narrative poems of Mr. Scott, which very few have heard of. Scott's poems included tales like The Lady of the Lake and Marmion, which inspired me to dream about fair ladies and brave knights, fostering my romantic inner life and shaping my daydream. My daydream as a child was of growing up to be a very worldly, very beautiful woman. Those were my only daydreams. I was just always this beautiful creature, and I played games of make-believe with very little girls in the neighborhood. I had no male friends at all. I only had girlfriends who could be ruled and made to play parts in my daydreams. I remember playing a game of make-believe when I was 9 or 10 with a girl and one of her friends. One of the girls said, "You can be a great dark prince." The girl next to her, who knew better, said, "Oh, he never plays the parts of real men." And I remember thinking, no, I never do. And the first girl continued excitedly, "Oh, well then, I will be the great dark prince." It didn't matter to her whether she played a male or female part, it was only a game. To me, it was much more serious than the game, however, though I didn't comprehend it at the time. Had I been born a woman, none of my life would have happened and I could have been very happy. Well, perhaps that's stretching a point. Let's just say I might have been I might not have been quite as unhappy. And of course, when you're on the outside looking in, it always seems that other people are happier than you anyway. At the age of 90, it has finally been explained to me that I am not really homosexual. I am transgender. I now accept that. All my life, I have wanted to be part of society without having to alter my daydream, my own reality. When it comes to sex, these days I'm asexual. Nevertheless, I'm now convinced that it has been my view of myself and not my view of men that has been my trouble. I no longer see myself as homosexual, though it is a word I have used to describe myself and which others have understandably used to describe me. I don't actually see myself as a man, though, of course, I know I'm not physically a woman. To start, I don't dress like a woman. I did know a man once who worked as a waitress for at least 6 months and who changed into his uniform in a room where other women were changing and was never detected. That's pretty amazing to me. I don't think I could have done that, though. I think my body is too like a man's body to have lived as a woman with any kind of success. I've also only ever worn drag once. I suppose you could say it was a success in that nothing happened. I put on women's clothes, left the place where I lived. I got on a bus and I went to the Regent Palace Hotel, had a drink there with my friend, got on another bus and came back. It was uneventful, but I think I did it to prove to myself that I could live the life of a woman, albeit only for a few hours. I don't really know what I expected. I never came out as transgender or gay because I was never in, and I've never known anything except the life I have. I either lived in the dream world in which I was a woman, or else I lived awkwardly in the outside world where I was inadequate. The only difference is that now I live my whole life unified by the fact that I can live in the outer world the way I live in my head. I couldn't always do that, and it's a freedom I now cherish. I don't think I ever consciously questioned my sexuality, my identity, my gender, or my daydream. It folded around me rather like the dream of Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard, the last line of which is, "Life that can be cruel can also be kind." The dream that meant so much to her finally closed about her. The dream that I am really a woman closed about me entirely. I went through life as though I was a boy in the outer world, but in my head, I went on as though I were a woman. This explains why my life has been so strange. I never went out in the evening thinking, now I must get some sex, which nowadays most people do. I went out saying, I must be my glorious self, and it will attract people to me. I didn't want any results. I just wanted to be admired. I think a lot of women think this way. Ms. Dietrich said, you have to let them put it in or they don't come back. That's a wonderful thing to have said. She didn't want sex. She wanted admiration, applause, and praise. Sex would have smudged her makeup and spoiled her hair. By accident, then, I have become sort of national hero, or worse, because I now realize it misrepresents me as much as how I managed to misrepresent them, a gay national hero. In reality, I was only ever a hopeless case. If I had tried to disguise myself as a real person, everyone would have said, who does he think, oh, I beg your pardon, who does she think she is? I never did it, and that gave way to the image that I have, legend, if you will. The only thing in my life I have wanted and didn't get was to be a woman. It will be my life's biggest regret. If the operation had been available and cheap when I was young, say when I was 25 or 26, I would have jumped at the chance. My life would have been much simpler as a result. I would have told nobody. Instead, I would have gone to live in a distant town and run a knitting wool shop, and no one would have ever known my secret. I would have joined the real world, and it would have been wonderful. Having said that, and ignoring the biological impossibility for a moment, I wouldn't have wanted to be a woman with children. I would have accepted children if they somehow came into my life, but the truth is, I don't really like children. I'm amused when people say to me, "But you were a child once." I was, but I wasn't the kind of child that made you like children. Now, for the rest of this book, you will have to forgive me. Having labeled myself homosexual, and having been labeled as such by the wider world, I've effectively lived a gay life for most of my years. Consequently, I can relate to gay men because I have more or less been one for so long in spite of my actual fate of being that of a woman trapped in a man's body. I refer to myself as homosexual without thinking because of how I have lived my life. If you are reading this and are gay, think of me as one of your own, even though you know the truth now. If it's confusing for you, think how confusing it has been for me these past 90 years.
Wait, is this my turn? Oh God, I'm dying. If it is, I apologize.
I think it's me.
Oh.
But I'm not big.
Okay, yes, I thought.
Next is Nicholas GORHAM.
Okay.
Okay. My apologies.
No worries. Okay, got it. Here we go. All right. Do you believe in God? Well, now, the last time You Know Who was mentioned, I began by saying I wouldn't like to say anything that gave offense. And someone in the audience said, "Why stop now?" But this is still something that worries me. So if at any moment anyone finds anything I say offensive, they have only to jump up and down, make a scene, and we will stop. I believe, like most people, not that of which logic can convince me, but what my nature inclines me to believe. This is so of nearly everybody. I am unable to believe in a God susceptible to prayer as petition. It does not seem to me to be sufficiently humble to imagine that whatever force keeps the planets turning in the heavens is going to stop what it's doing to give me a bicycle with 3 speeds. But if God is the universe that encloses the universe, or if God is the cell within the cell, or if God is the cause behind the cause, then this I accept absolutely. And if prayer is a way of aligning your body with the forces that flow through the universe, then prayer I accept. But there is a worrying aspect about the idea of God, like witchcraft or the science of the zodiac or any of these other things. The burden is placed elsewhere. And this is what I do not like. You see, to me, you are the heroes of this hour. I do not think the earth was ever meant to be your home. I do not see the sky as a canopy held over your head by cherubs, or see the earth as a carpet laid at your feet. You used to live an easy lying down life in the sea, but your curiosity and your courage prompted you to lift your head out of the sea and gasp this fierce element in which we live. They are seated on Mars with their little green arms folded, saying, we can be reasonably certain there is no life on Earth because there the atmosphere is oxygen, which is so harsh that it corrupts metal. But you learned to breathe it. Furthermore, you crawled out of the sea and you walked up and down the beach for centuries until your thigh bones were thick enough to walk on land. It was a mistake, but you did it. Once you have this view of your past, not that it was handed to you, but that you did it, then your view of the future will change. This terror of the atom bomb will pass. Something will arise which will breathe radiation if you learn to breathe oxygen. So you don't have to worry. Don't keep looking into the sky to see what's happening. Embrace the future. All you have to do about the future is what you did about the past. Rely on your curiosity and your courage and ride through the night.
So this piece is about drag queens and performers. Though the saying goes, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I think it's important to note that flattery is very different from giving a compliment. Flattery is superficial. A true compliment is heartfelt. Anyway, no one's ever tried to be like me. I'm happy to say so. So I've never been flattered in that way. And since I think you should have a style which precludes imitation, my lack of imitators could mean that I've been successful in this effort. The stars of the past were, I think, encouraged to foster their idiosyncrasies to become more like themselves. And of course, the imitators settled on them because they were so easy to imitate. Mae West, Betty Davis, being just two examples. Nowadays, you have actresses who cannot be imitated because they're so different from film to film. They're actually allowed to act, which is probably a win for entertainment. However, I don't think people should assume that you are making fun of somebody just because you are imitating them. That seems to me very sad and quite mistaken. People imitate others because they like them. It would take a very strange individual to imitate someone they didn't like, because surely they would hate themselves all the time they were doing it. I do think imitators can be bitchy, however, and I don't think that's all right. I don't think you should imitate people so as to exaggerate their mannerisms into absurdity. But then I don't approve of bitchiness of any kind, so why should I approve of that? I don't think I've ever been bitchy. I've tried not to be. I can't say I haven't been, but since I despise it in other people, I try my best to expunge it from my own actions. Bitchiness is merely a joke at someone else's expense. And of course, the only people who laugh at those are whomever isn't offended. Charles Pierce was an imitator, and I liked him because he always acknowledged me if I was in the audience. He imitated various people, but he was stuck with the people of his own generation. He imitated Tallulah Bankhead, but now no one can remember who Tallulah Bankhead was. That put him in a very difficult position, but I liked his shows. And I do love Joey Arias. Joey Arias is everywhere. Wherever I go to a place, he's always there. And when he came to interview me for a film made by a German director, he disguised himself and looked so different that I wouldn't have known had he not introduced himself to me. He was a nice looking blonde young man with a white face and a mulberry colored mouth. and a black wig. All that added to make him a mask, not merely made up, but an actual mask, almost. Why does he, and why he does that, I don't know. But I shouldn't think it's grown, but I should think it's grown on him. At first, he was just made up, and then he was more made up, and then he was made up so much that he was Joe Arias. He's wonderful. I don't think Mr. Arias could portray me in a movie, however, but he could if he appeared as himself. The thing is, I've never done drag. I've only once worn women's clothes, and that wasn't in order to appear as a drag queen. It was to appear as a woman, which is different. When you want to wear drag, you want to make fun of women. I wanted to be a woman, which altogether is different. Boy George is something of an imitator. I admire Boy George because he was only about 22 when he had to ask all the difficult questions. He was asked whether he preferred the company of men or women, and he said, "I like to be with people who like to be with me." And that, of course, is what most people feel. I can't imagine anyone looking at their life and saying, "I don't know enough women, I must find some acceptable woman." Instead, you end up knowing people who turn up and never leave because they like spending time with you. Merci beaucoup.
The religious right. The religious right is the biggest mistake I can think of, but I don't think you can alter people's religious views without creating a lot of trouble. This is because generally, people don't want their religion tampered or interfered with. I don't know where they got their views from, but I think it may have been from St. Paul, who was the public relations officer of the whole sin movement. Christ, of course, said almost nothing about sin or sex, except that if you looked at a woman with desire, you had already committed adultery. St. Paul, on the other hand, had very definite views about sin. He said it was better to marry than to burn, which is not a hearty recommendation for the state of matrimony, but does give you the impression that he thought casual sex was wrong. I think that this is the stumbling block most people have with the religious right. They don't want people to be happy except in a conventional married setting. And that has to change, but I don't know how. The religious right, like most other religious people, have the view that everyone has to think the same way. Generally, I think that's the view that all people have. We all think we are right, that we know best, and that we have it all figured out. Conversely, if you do not have the same moral system as someone else, you're wrong in their eyes and will have to change your mind. Non-believers have a looser view. I have never known a non-believer who was angry about the people who did believe, not solely on the basis of their belief anyway. It's the believers who are angry with people who don't believe. So there's something wrong with the believers. It's the insecurity of the highest order. Yet, though I can identify that as the chief problem, I don't think we can alter it in our own lifetime. I don't think it's part of human nature to accept that other people have a different belief and they must be allowed to maintain it. We all want to be right. And when confronted with someone who thinks otherwise, we take it as an affront or a challenge to our own beliefs. In truth, there can never be a total divorce between church and state, even though it is written into the US Constitution. This is because whatever people do has a moral value, whether it is a political act or a personal act or an attitude. And if you can bring the moral value into it, then it becomes a religious question. So it's unrealistic to think that you can divorce church from state. You can, of course, divorce them in as much as you can avoid invoking a formal religion, but religion will always find its way into politics, not least because it's the Puritans and missionaries who tend to stand for office. One of the odd things about the religious right is, of course, their affinity for guns. It doesn't seem to tie into the thou shalt not kill theme discussed above. In my opinion, there are too many guns in America. And in truth, there are just as many opinions about guns in America as there are actual guns. I just don't think guns are necessary. I don't understand why Mr. Heston, who of course once famously played Moses in a motion picture, says that they are. Mr. Heston says that Americans have the right to bear arms, and this of course is true, but it's a nonsense rule because it is a frontiersman rule, and there are no frontiers now. Nobody goes out onto a wooden porch with a shotgun and says to an unknown visitor, "What do you want?" I mean, nowadays we all live civilized lives. We don't need guns. You call at the house, you are invited in, and you sit down and talk. I think the fascination with guns is connected to the American dream of manliness, which obsesses American males, females too. They obsess about the sexes. Women should be feminine and a man should be manly. They've occasionally gotten the women to be feminine, but they haven't gotten the men to be fully manly. Men will go to gymnasiums and build up their muscles until they look quite strange, but they never do anything with them except display them. So that really is no help. In America, because of the guns, there are a colossal number of shootings, murders. We hear about them because we live in the age of television. In a time gone by with no television, it would be years before you heard that there had been a murder in Portland. And then you'd think, oh, I never heard about that. Oh, I wonder what happened. But now we hear about everything, all the time, as it's happening. That's probably a good thing because now we know what a terrible state we're in. Of course, criminals will obtain guns whether they are legal or not. Based on this, the pro-gun lobby argues that it would only be law-abiding citizens that would suffer from gun control or an outright ban. But I can't help thinking that if only the police and criminals had arms, we would be a bit better off because right now all children are gangsters and they shoot people indiscriminately. It's pretty frightening. The latest school shooting was very surprising. The perpetrators were apparently planning it for a long time, and that makes it really very sinister. If I possessed a gun in school, I would certainly have shot everybody, chiefly the staff. But I didn't have a gun, and it would have been very difficult for me to get one. It's so easy for people to get guns in America these days. Guns lie about the household of people where there are children, or children know where the guns are stored and can get at them. People worry about the effect on children of television, but nobody faces the real issue. Why do you make toy guns? Why not forbid them to be made? If children didn't see them in shops, within 6 months they wouldn't want them. Another tragedy is when children point the toy guns at the police, who think they are real and get shot for real themselves. I can understand the disasters of the world if they are unforeseeable or unforgettable. But when things are so easy to prevent and are still not done, it's incomprehensible to me. Currently, to an American child, to be grown up is to carry a gun. You have to alter that, which only takes a little arrangement. I don't know if there's much money to be made out of selling toy guns, but I don't think money should be made this way. I don't think money or profit should be the sole reason for anything.
I love being with you on these evenings in the theater. I feel like the 50 of us are here in my living room. Now, I know it's too late to ask you to abide by restrictions handed down to you by your pastors and your masters and your elders and your betters. So what I think we need are chains of our own making. However heavy these may be, they will never feel as restraints placed by others. And not any old chains. We will have to have a system that begins with each of us trying to decide what it takes to make him or his the way he is or she is. And then agreeing not to do or say or wear anything that doesn't reinforce that image. Yes? Oh, I'm glad you agree. This involves a journey to the interior, not altogether a pleasant experience. Why? Well, because as well as totaling what you consider your assets, you also must take into account and look at the things that your friends call the trouble with you. For the whole purpose of life is to reconcile the glowing opinion that you have for yourself with the terrible things that other people say about you. And the synthesis between these two opinions will be your identity. But that's not quite enough. Your identity is like your fingerprints. These also too are your very own, but if they're discovered, they may be used against you. Therefore, you will have to polish up your new identity until it becomes a style, something interesting by which you are prepared, by which you are proud to be identified, and something with which you can barter with the outer world to get from it what you want. Now, I won't say what you deserve, because if we all got what we deserved, we would starve, right? You agree with that, right? This polishing up process will make your days so formal that compared with them, the life of a Trappist monk would seem like an orgy. Now, I know I'm rattling on about problems by which world standards would be trivial. That I understand. But I do so because never a day goes by, well, never a month goes by without someone coming to me and saying, "Oh, you do have a nice life." Me? A nice life? This would be a reasonable remark if I lived as you do in mansions riddled with a standard of living, but I don't. I live on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, just beyond Redemption, in a small room, which has never been cleaned in 15 years. Which brings me to my first message of hope. You ready? Never sweep the place where you live, because after the first 4 years, the dirt doesn't get any worse. It's just a question of not losing your nerve. I'm sure I'm right about this. The other day, a woman said to me, "No wonder you're so nice to everybody. You never do any housework." So now it transpires that all the middle income and middle class and the upper class housewives in the world are in a blind rage, 10:30 in the morning, worn out. I shouldn't wonder, with all that sweeping and dusting and washing of dishes and all of that. Now, there's no need, now check this out, there's no need to wash dishes unless you find yourself past the fish barrier. You heard me, the fish barrier. It works like this. When you're hungry and you look at the plate, like you're looking at the plate, and it says bacon, you think, I could eat an egg. And then the next day, you leave the egg there. The next day, when your plate says egg, you think, I could eat a fish. But when you look at your plate and it says fish, it's time to wash the dishes. Right? I'm only telling you these things, by the way. So as you set yourself free from your boring domestic rituals, I want to give you some time each day when you can stop looking outward and start looking inward. Then you can decide who you truly are. Now, the next thing my visitors say is, "Oh, you do know some wonderful people." And I do. But this too would only be a logical comment if my room was stuffed with people of wealth, of influence, and of status. And it isn't. It's filled with the denizens of the Lower East Side. And that brings me to my second message of hope. You ready? Never try to keep up with the Joneses. Just drag them down to your level. It's cheaper. Then I'm asked, where do I meet these wonderful people? And I say, as a rule, in layabout cafes. Those marvelous places where you could sit through lunch, tea, and supper with 1 cup of coffee. I used to offer to take my friends to one of these marvelous places. But they would always mutter something like, "Of course, when we get there, you'll have to tell me what to say." I hope I am painting for you a thoroughly depressing picture of someone who has reduced himself to the level where he envies me and who seems to be living like a kidnapped victim in unwanted isolation, only a few yards from where the traffic of the world is going by, with nothing more substantial boarding up windows than self-doubt. The words, quote, "You'd have to tell me what to say," are a clue. They show us that we are not dealing with a dreary old search for true love. The person who wants to make friends doesn't have to think what to say. He has to learn how to listen. Now, we'd all like to have friends, but it means you gotta listen to them. The price is ridiculous. So, What does he want? As I see it, he longs for somewhere to go. And when he gets there, for somebody to be. But where and who? When modern man looks around in search of a destiny, nothing presents itself to him as it did when I was young, as being suited to his age, his sex, his nationality, his class, and his station in life. Nowadays, whichever direction he looks in, he finds himself in a landscape without signposts, without milestones, without roads. The sheer vastness of the terrain that lies before him may make him feel what? Small. Now, if we are going to develop our own style, we must banish forever the thoughts that are self-diminishing. We mustn't imagine that anything we discover when we make our journey into the interior is too trivial or even too distasteful to present to the world. The curiosity of your neighbors is a tribute to your individuality, and it should be encouraged. Never defend yourself. I am appalled by the lust for evasion, which seems to be absolutely everywhere, even among actors who presumably are a nation of exhibitionists. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton were so great, they brought style to marriage, a difficult thing to do. And then they brought style to divorce. But even they expressed the fear that the paparazzi in Rome might take pictures of them in the lavatory. Now, the way to deal with that problem, if you think it is one, is not to build a higher and higher wall around your villa, but to figure out how to urinate with style. I want to leave you with this. All concealment is wrong. If there were none, half of the world's problems would disappear overnight. There would be no snooping, no fixing, no blackmail, no fear in the world other than physical fear. That wouldn't be a bad start. And not only is all secrecy a sin, but it doesn't work. Thank you.
What does it mean to be human? When I'm asked what it meant to be human, I was very sorry that I was not a scholar and had no philosophical point of view to express. More than not being a scholar, I'm not really a human being. I do not mind spending long hours alone, and I never find something to do. This is part of my nature. My sister reminded me before she died that she and my mother sat on each side of the fireplace and occupied themselves with darning socks and knitting and writing letters on their laps. I lay as a child on the rug between them, and once an hour, one of them said, "Why don't you get something to do?" And I said, "Why should I?" That is a question I cannot answer. Why should I have something to do? Of course, there is a theory that time is money. It is an American theory. I'm not earning money while I'm doing nothing, which is sad. But if I were rich, I would never do anything. I was asked by a paper, if you suddenly had $1 million, what would you do? And I said, go to bed and never get up again. This was a great disappointment to the people who asked me the question. But idleness is my only occupation, and people are my only hobby. If I regard what I think is human, and perhaps I was asked precisely because I am not a human being and therefore have a detached view of the subject, I would say it was a preoccupation with the idea of death. The reason why people do not live alone and do not spend hours doing nothing is because they can hear time ticking by. Then they develop hobbies which drive them mad. You may ask them, why do you do this? They ultimately say, well, it helps kill time. I don't want my time dead. Time is meant to be lived. Those who are not hopeless are worried that one day their lives will end. And if you live long enough, of course, you long for it to end. That's been my desire in recent times. I only hope to become extinct. But before all that, you must try everything. Have children. Behave in such a way that monuments are built to you. Rule the world. Have streets and theaters named after you. Write your autobiography. These are ways to stay alive, and this seems to be a preoccupation with being human. When I was younger and was not ill, I didn't mind how long I lived. Now that every step of my life is painful, I long for death. If being human has any other special aspect, it is that in every human being, there are two people. One who sits in judgment on the other. The worldly, the doing person acts irresponsibly, or nobly, or wisely, or foolishly, according to the mood or the situation. But inside him, further away, is an abstract spiritual being who never changes and who sits in judgment on him. This situation becomes evident when we hear people say, I was ashamed of myself. Who is ashamed of whom? It is this duality between the active living organism and the contemplative inner self that sits in judgment that constitutes the whole human being. This is, I think, what constitutes a human being.
Thank you, Quentin. Thank you, readers. And thank you, audience. We did this for you in the Gene Frankel Theatre.